Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Trustee Dan McLean, Chair of the Finance, Budget, and Enrollment Committee. Today is Tuesday, June 10th, and this is going to be a special meeting, which is a continuation of our meeting of Wednesday, June 4th. Trustees and welcome everyone, trustees, staff, and members of the public. So, it is a continuation of the meeting, but I think it's good practice and policy for us. I'm going to ask everyone who's able to please stand. We acknowledge that we are hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas, of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Miigwech. So there's only one thing left on the agenda that we didn't cover in our meeting of June 4th, and that was item 7.4, which is the 2025-2026 operational budget update. So this is all the questions that we had put in, the reports that trustees had requested of staff. So this is just to be clear with everybody, this is an information session. The meeting on the 16th is when we expect to have a formal plan that will be on the table to discuss and amend as trustees deem fit. But tonight is solely designed around information. And with that, Associate Director Zucker.
Thank you. And through the chair, as the chair indicated, we are bringing this report forward as an update. It does include the answers to the questions that were asked by trustees, as well as an update on core education funding that was released on May 23rd, as well as our updated financial position, and then some of the business arising motions and our next steps. So as you can see, and as indicated, we are on the continuation of our June 4th meeting, our FBEC meeting, and this is our budget update on June 16th. So next Monday, we will bring forward for approval the 25-26 budget. And the intention is for that to go to the June 18th board meeting. So with regards to questions and answers for the proposed options to balance, at the April 30th FBEC and the May 15th special FBEC, and that continued to May 20th. So over those 3 meetings, trustees did have a number of questions related to those proposed options to balance, and staff were able to review all of those questions and provide the answers included in Appendix A of the report. So we will be happy to provide any clarification after the presentation, but just again, I think all of the questions that were asked have been answered in Appendix A. With regards to core education funding, it was released by the ministry on May 23rd. The memo did indicate that provincially, the grants have increased by 3.3% compared to 24-25. However, it's important to note that the increase takes into account increases in enrollment across the province. So across the provincially, enrollment has increased. It also takes into account the changes in salary benchmarks as a result of collective bargaining. And there's a 2.75% increase for principals and vice principals and teachers, as well as management. And then there's also $1 per increase for education workers. So for us, that's mostly CUPE and our non-union, non-managerial staff. So for TDSB, though, the projection of core education funding for next year, for 25-26, is $3.49 billion. And that is an increase of 1.9% from 24-25. Again, in comparison to the 3.3% provincially. Part of that is as a result of our enrollment decreasing slightly, projected to decrease slightly, but also the majority of the increase, again, relates to increases in salaries that also have a corresponding expenditure. So as indicated, our salary benchmarks have been adjusted to reflect the collective agreement increases for terms and conditions. For us, that is 63.2 million. For student transportation, the ministry indicated that the increase to this grant is 6.3 million provincially. However, for TDSB, the increase was 1.9 million or 2.4%. For the non-salary benchmarks, there was an increase of 2% for the non-staff portion of school operations. So that's for things like utilities and insurance, other maintenance costs. For us, that was an increase of 5.7 million. Again, recognizing the, when we did our projections, this 2% increase is consistent and has been for a number of years. So that was expected and it was included in the original 25-26 projections. So although it is an increase in funding, it doesn't help us when we're looking at the increases in our existing projected financial position to a new financial position. In addition, this is the second year of the phase-in of the census adjustment. So if trustees will recall, by moving from the 2015 census to the 2021 census, there is a consistent figure across the province that is provided to all boards. And TDSB's portion of that amount has decreased from 25-26, or sorry, from the 2015 census. So last year, there was a reduction of 3.2 million in core ed funding, and the ministry recognized that it was late to tell us that, so they gave us a one-time grant to offset that reduction. However, this year, there is a reduction of 5.7 million, and there is no offsetting grant. And the 3.2 million offsetting grant is also gone. So really the impact on our financial position this year is 8.9 million. The 5.7 plus the 3.2. So in total, our changes in revenue for core education total 66.8 million. And that sounds great because, as you recall, we only had a $58 million deficit. But unfortunately, there are expenditures also that are impacted by the core education funding. And so when we look at our updated financial position, we have already included 4.9 million of the 66.8 million when we did our original projections. So when we look at our total updated financial position, you'll only see an increase in grants of 61.9 million. Our expenditures, again, as I indicated, even though there is an increase in revenue, there's also an increase in expenditures. For us, the salary benchmarks and the original projection did not include those collective agreement increases. And we also calculated the final qualifications and experience grant. So based on that, our increase in salaries from projections is $52 million. And in addition, the budget team reviewed all of our expenditures and they were finalized based on the grants that we received in a review of all of those expenditures, and that resulted in an increase of 6.9 million. So a total increase in expenditures of 58.9 million. So we have an increase in revenue of 61.9, but we also have an increase in expenditures of 58.9. So the total change in financial position is a positive $3 million. And that decreases our original financial position from 58 to 55. I'm just going to pause here. I didn't do this at the beginning, but on a $3.49 billion budget, the budget team were within $3 million when they did our projected financial position. That is incredible. It is a testament to the work of the team. And I do just want to take 2 minutes to acknowledge the planning department who helps us with our enrollment, the people and culture department who help us with all things to do with 85% of our budget, all of our staff, the facilities department who helps us with our capital budget, but also with the projections related to our school operations or our maintenance. And then we have our budget team, Sri Alexarwin, Stephanie Harris, Felix Schema, Lawrence Zhang, Shaquille Abdullah, Rishi Ramtahal, Annie Fernandez, Sandy Sindri, Christine Young, Sharon Sin, Sharon Toes. I just wanted to acknowledge them because, again, the work that they have done since February in order to get us to this position is endless, it seems. We were prepared for this for June 4th from a release that came on a Friday afternoon on May 23rd and had to get out on May 30th. So that while the investigation was going on and these same people were answering questions from the investigators. So I just, again, to be within $3 million on a $3.4 billion budget and to also do this work so quickly with so many other competing priorities, I wanted to take that opportunity to acknowledge them. So thank you. And of course, I didn't mention Craig and I really should have. He really is the backbone of that group and keeps everybody on track. So thank you. So, sorry, I will keep going. So we have a projected financial position then of 55 million, but as trustees recall, there were budget reductions that were approved of 20.6 million on May 21st, and that leads us to an updated financial position of $34.4 million. So, we were waiting for the core education funding to be announced to see what the impact would be. We are fortunate that it was a positive impact, but again, it wasn't enough of an impact in order for us to be not in a position where we have to keep continuing to discuss further reductions. Then I'm going to get to some of the motions, and the first one is about funding for senior team. There's a request about how senior team was funded. And so there are 3 main funding sources for the senior team. It's from the core, 2 of them are from the core education funding. One of them is the Learning Resource Fund, and the other one is the School Board Administration Fund. And then one of them is our responsive education programs. And the responsive education programs are those one-time grants that we received from the ministry for specific ministry priorities. So the Learning Resource Fund portion of the core education fund funding, it really funds lead positions. They call them the leads. So they provide funding in order for somebody to support the work that's happening in each of these areas. So TDSB is funded for 2 school effectiveness leads, 1 early years lead, 1 student success lead, and 1 Indigenous education lead. So of our 49 positions, 5 of them are those lead positions. In addition, the board receives a responsive education program. Again, that's one-time programming. And there are currently 3 senior team positions funded by the REP programs. And those are the 2 math system superintendent positions, as well as our human rights system officer position. For the remainder and the majority of the senior team, funding comes from the executive component of the School Board Administration Fund. That grant funds 34.3227 senior team positions in 24-25. And just again, a reminder, it's not an enveloped grant, so the board does have flexibility in allocating funding to meet local needs. So we, again, have 49 members reported as part of senior team. That includes those 8 positions, 5 leads and 3 supported by REPs. And then in addition, we do have some positions that are reported as part of senior team that, based on ministry instructions and a review with other larger boards, can be reported in the non-executive component of the school board administration fund. So we're reporting all 41 positions in the executive component, but most boards and ministry instructions allow us to report outside in the non-executive component. So it doesn't impact the positions and it doesn't impact the budget, but it does impact the reporting. So in 25-26, we will be reviewing the reporting of the senior team and ensure that we're following the ministry instructions and make sure that we are comparable in our reporting to other boards. And that will reduce the number of positions reported. And I keep saying reported because that's an important part of it, as part of senior team from 49 to 44. When we look at potential cost savings, we did do a significant restructuring of senior team for 24-25, and we did reduce by 3 positions, and that's about 6% of our senior team. As a result of that restructuring, and when we compare to other boards, I think it's important to note 3 main things when looking at the comparison. One is that the number of schools supported by each TDSB school superintendent averages over 25. Across the province, the number is closer to 20 schools or even lower. The number of system superintendents or executive officers that we have is consistent with the number of system superintendents and executive officers at the largest boards in Ontario. And what I mean by that is we have 1 executive officer of finance. Most boards have 1 executive officer of finance. We have, 5 other major areas like our human resources function, IT, legal, communications, and facilities. We also have supports for special education. We have supports for program. Those are consistent from board to board. So if we actually compare the number of system superintendents or executive officers from TDSB to other larger boards, the number is actually very similar, even though, again, we have 100,000 more students and significantly more employees. And that leads to the last one, which is the ratio of senior team members, even the 49 to the comparison to the students or the number of students at TDSB is in line or lower than most boards across Ontario. So that ratio of senior team members, again, to the number of students is in line. That being said, the director is committed in 2025-26 to reviewing the makeup of senior team with the goal of aligning the number of positions and senior team with the number of positions funded. With the motion relating to pools and swim programming, there were a number of motions. A significant amount of information related to the pools was provided in questions 1 through 29 in Appendix A. In addition, the board or the report provides additional information that was requested through board motion. So that is included in Appendix E. With the next steps related to pools, tomorrow at PPC, there will be a motion. The motion related to the request of TLC will be brought to and discussed at PPC tomorrow. And given that work, and trustees have that report now and hopefully have had a chance to review it, but the time required for implementation, we are recommending that we continue with permit fees in the 25-26 school year to January 1st. And that we are recommending, also, we will be recommending, there are no recommendations in this report. This is just a highlight of what is to come. We will be recommending the implementation of the full permit fee increases for September 1st, 2025. So initially, the trustees approved a decision on February 19th that talked about a phase-in to those pool permit fees. And so we are going to be recommending moving to the full implementation. I will say that we heard at the Community Use of Schools Community Advisory Committee, there was an ask that, would it be possible to keep the permits going for at least another year if we were to do this? So it is something that the permit holders have also been contemplating as a way for us to be able to maintain permit fees and give some stability to our permit holders for the 25-26 year. With regards to our budget, the next steps include, again, a special FBEC committee meeting on Monday, where we will be bringing forward a budget for approval that will go to board on June 18th, so on Wednesday. And then once approved, we will submit the budget to the ministry by the June 30th deadline. And again, recognizing all of the work that the team does, once the budget is approved by the board, there's an over 200-page document that has to be completed in order to be submitted to the ministry. So that once the 18th happens, that work continues until the submission date. So with that, I will turn it back to the chair and we'll be happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you. And I'll join your congratulations and gratitude for the all the members of the finance team for all the work that they've done over these months and helped the committee do its work. Are there any questions on that? So we'll now open up for questions. We don't have any initially, so I've got a couple. So I'm going to pass the chair to Trustee Earhart. Actually, before we do that, can we get trustees that have joined the meeting online?
James Lee's here.
James Lee is here. Trustee Arts is here. Thank you. Okay, great. I'll pass the chair to Trustee Earhart.
Yep, go ahead.
Thank you through the chair. The transportation was lower than the provincial. Our piece was lower. Was there a rationale for that? Our increase seemed to be lower than.
So through the chair, part of it would be enrollment. The other is the route planning. So we had to submit again our route planning, both us and Toronto Catholic, to the ministry. They are still revising the funding formula, as well as right now there's no fuel escalation, which may come into impact in the year. So it's a comparative, it's pretty stable. It's a small change based on enrollment and on the routes that we are planning for next year at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. And again, through the chair. So we're going to restructure from senior team from 49 to 44, but that's largely just a restructuring as opposed to a monetary. And then when we're at 44, we'll be within the ministry's expectations of our size for what our size should be. Is that correct?
Through the chair, I would say, first of all, I would call it a reporting because I don't think the structure of the senior team will change as a result of just, again, making sure that we're reporting senior team consistently with the ministry instructions as well as other boards. And sorry, the second part.
Well, just around ministry, like, where are we going to be moving into what their expectations, I guess, from a reporting concept that we're going to.
Yeah, so we will be within 2 of the number that are funded.
Okay, and through you, Chair. From a monetary sense, is there a percentage that the ministry expects us to be within from an administration senior team perspective? And how do we do in relationship to their expectations?
So the executive component of the school board administration fund is not necessarily, it's not enveloped, but school board administration is enveloped, and it's a little bit different from other enveloping requirements. Usually, say special education is enveloped, meaning that you can only spend those funds on special education, but you can certainly spend more. And student success is similar. For school board administration, it is the opposite. It's a maximum that we can spend on school board administration. And I believe the number is about it's about $2 million plus 2.4% of our budget or our operating budget. And so we are within that reporting requirement or spending requirement, and we have always been.
Okay, through you, Chair. Because I got a different impression when I heard the minister talk on the floor of the legislature that seemed to be implying that we were disproportionately large, but apparently we're lean and we're within the ministry's expectation for school boards from a percentage basis of our budget.
That's correct. And I think that that's why it's important to highlight those three key areas about the number of students that we're supporting and the number of schools that our superintendents are supporting, and also just in general, the number of system and executives that we have in comparison to other boards.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I think that that's all my questions for now. I'll take the chair back. Thank you, Trustee Earhart. Do we have any online?
Trustee Patel.
Trustee Patel, yep, sorry. I'm getting.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Stacy, the staff. I know it's a very challenging job, and we have to budget. I mean, when we have balanced the budgets and then come through recommendations with motions and back and forth. I have been there, and I command the team, and not just the finance and budget team, and everybody involved with this. I have a few questions on this, and then the next steps. So we are 34.4 million required to balance the budget. Is it the same benchmark still applies of less than 1%? We do not have to go to ministry for approval, or it's a different scenario?
So through the chair, the ministry's definition of a balanced budget is either is 1% of our operating budget, which is 33.4 million. But up to our reserves available to offset that, our accumulated surplus. And so for us, that's projected to be $16.7 million. So we would be considered balanced, I would say, if we were at 16.7 million or lower. That being said, given that we had a deficit for more than 3 years and the requirement to submit a deficit recovery plan, it's important to recognize how that deficit recovery plan fits into this as well. So I would say that if we're below 16.7, then we meet the definition of a balanced budget. But there is also an expectation that we have a multi-year financial recovery plan or deficit recovery plan. And that would be, it has been for us, it was asked to be a 2-year plan through the letters that we received last June. So I believe if we were to get to 16.7, there would be an expectation that we would get to 0 in 26-27.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if I'm able to ask some other questions related to how many swimming instructors are we losing? I don't know if it's an appropriate question right now. Is it okay, Chair, to ask that question?
Yeah, you can ask how many
So how many?
staff has put forward options to balance.
Yeah.
You can ask questions about the options to balance that staff has identified at this point.
So for you, Mr. Chair, how many swimming instructors we will lose according to this budget?
So through the chair, currently in the proposed options to balance, there are 86 aquatic instructors. In the current or the option to balance that came forward on April 30th included eliminating swimming programming, so all 86. That being said, we do currently have 12 vacancies. So we're talking about 74 positions. But that being said, we are looking at how do we maintain some programming as was asked by one of the motions from trustees. And so we are currently reviewing that, and a proposal will come forward on Monday.
Thank you. And to you, Mr. Chair, last week we heard a lot of delegation about PCEW workers. How many of them are we losing from that department?
So through the chair, those individuals are included in our model schools allocation that we provide, and there have never been any reductions proposed in the options to balance, and there was never an intention to bring them back as an option to balance, but also based on the motion from the last FBEC meeting, we will not be bringing them forward as an option to balance. So the answer is 0.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, and I know this is an operational question, and if it's inappropriate, you can always defer the question. Yes, it was my motion about the senior staffing, but I really wanted to know about the centrally assigned principals and how many centrally assigned principals do we have, and what role do they play? And in which department? How many centrally assigned principals do we have?
Director, do we need to go into private to have this discussion? You'll let me know when we need to, if this wanders into.
The chair, really, Mr. Chair, if we have to go to private, I did get some answer last week during the private session, but the roles and the duties. So that's why I asked that, is this a public information? If it's a public if it's not a public information, if it's a private information, I did get the information last week from associate director of that. So I'm not sure, because I do have a follow-up of a comparison between the 2 or 3 departments. That's where I'm reaching at. But if it's a private information, that's fine. We do not have to go to private. I do not want to waste time on that. I'll just leave it up to director to comment on that if he's comfortable commenting.
Through the chair, I'm happy to provide an initial response. I hear Trustee Patel, understanding that there may be some aspects of their follow-up questions that we may need to follow up on in private session or outside of the meeting. Presently, we have, I believe, 50 centrally assigned principals working across various departments, both academic and business. I'll note that over the last couple of years, there was a significant review done of centrally assigned principal roles, and there was a reduction of, I believe, 7 centrally assigned principals over the last 2 years. I have indicated through conversations that over the next several months, the summer and through the fall, we will be undertaking a review of various central positions, including as related to senior team. Some moves we will be able to move forward with in the near term, and others will require further review, and that this will include consideration of centrally assigned principal roles and other central roles, and we'll be seeking efficiencies as we move forward. So I hope that provides sufficient information for what you're wondering about at this time, Trustee Patel.
Thank you, Director. Appreciate that information. And it's just, I can only recommend, if we can find some savings in that department, we'll definitely appreciate, because, there are some team members of TDSB, like when I talk about employees, some are definitely needed. So I'll appreciate if we can find some savings in that department. Moving along, I was going through the financial facts. And in the financial facts, I see that there is a significant amount of purchase done to buy TPC tokens. And I did raise that questions during my TSTG budget session. So I like Director to shed some lights on that purchase. that why suddenly the purchase of that big amount has been done?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can answer that question. So we had traditionally budgeted, I don't have the exact number in front of me, I believe it was $2 million historically for TTC tickets. Our experience is around $400,000. So this year's budget has been reduced to 1 million for TTC tickets until we get to see where our demographics or our students are that require TTC. So the budget was adjusted this year for 25, 26 down to 1 million based on our current experience since the pandemic of around $500 million of TTC tickets on average.
Thank you, System Officer Craig. And through you, Mr. Chair, do we have a centrally log of where these TTC tokens are predominantly used in which neighborhoods, who are using them, and like an inventory log? Do we have anything kind of a system where we know where this tokens goes?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would have to go and request the information from the Toronto Transportation Group. They do the reimbursements for tokens to the schools, but we could try to grab that information, but I don't have that handy with me.
That's good. And then through you, Mr. Chair, my last question to Associate Director Stacey Zucker, what should we expect on Monday from you?
Through the chair, if we are looking at a 2-year deficit recovery plan, then it is the intention of staff to bring forward a budget for 25-26 that would allow us to be within the $16.7 million based on the options to balance that we had previously presented.
Thank you. And just one more small thing came to my mind. Is there any cuts to special education from this budget?
Through the chair, there have been no reductions to special education and actually based on the ministry definition, we would say that we've increased funding to special education because the salaries have increased and therefore our costs have increased. That being said, there is some, as is always presented in the school-based staffing report, there is the ability to move between teaching staff and support staff based on the needs of students.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Stacey and your team. I commend, as I said in the beginning. Thank you so much for all your work. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Trustee Patel. Trustee Earhart.
Okay, thanks very much. I've got notes all over the place, so I apologize as I scroll through. Just remind me, where are we sitting now for the current deficit position? I know it's painful. I've heard 58, 55, 38, 34. What are we considering at this time, that number? Thank you.
So the number is 34.4, and that is based on the approval of trustees of 20.6 million. So that's where from the 55 to the 34.4. But 34.4 is what we need right now in order to get to a balanced position if we were going to get to zero.
Okay, so and 33.4 million, as I saw noted, was within the ministry's definition of 1%. So we are at this time $1 million off from the ministry's definition of the 1% for balance, right?
Yeah, through the chair, if we had the reserves available, then we would be within $1 million.
Okay, so just, and I know we did run through, and that's part of my questions, what was in the education budget. Knowing that there are many school boards in deficit positions due to the depletion of reserves as directed by the ministry during the pandemic. We're currently, we're all experiencing this 5-year anniversary of the pandemic declaration. Was there anything in the budget to sustain and support school boards considering this depletion of reserves? Thank you.
Through the chair, I will go to AD Zucker, or resident expert, to continue to respond to questions. I did want to just highlight through the chair a particular turn of phrase, Trustee Earhart, to say that during the pandemic, boards were enabled or allowed to access reserves to support operational needs to save lives and to ensure that students and staff were safe and to conduct board business and continue learning. However, I just caution around using the term directed because that would mean that there is that boards must, or that there is an expectation. I think that TDSB was not different from many other boards that needed to access reserves in order to respond to local need. But I think allowed is perhaps a more accurate term than directed. That being said, I think the concept of what you're talking about is an important one, and I'll turn to AD Zucker to respond.
Thank you. And through the chair, over the last 5 years, initially after we came back from the pandemic, there was some funding that was provided to transition, I would say, back to regular operations. And over the last 2 years, that funding has been eliminated, continued to be eliminated over that 2-year period. So there is no more funding that will help us in either moving to recuperate some of that spending that we did, or to support any kind of residual impacts of COVID.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for the clarification. I wasn't a trustee at the time. So they were enabled to, boards like ours were enabled to dip into reserves to meet the unprecedented and extraordinary need. They were not funded to the level of need, rather enabled to drain reserves is how I understand that. So thank you. And we did receive some transitional funding like other boards. However, to me, it was clearly insufficient because the children who were born in those pandemic years are only just now entering our system. And we are starting to see on the other side of that, from updates that I've heard in this room, that our Con Ed programming, which is the programming for those above the age of 18, but still considered a youth in their early 20s, is increasing. Those are the young people who, in my interpretation, may not have completed high school public education during those pandemic years for a variety of reasons. And that area is also in a growth phase. So given just those 2 data points, not even anything about learning losses, mental health, or anything else, I find it extraordinary that there continues to be nothing in the budget for all boards, considering these extraordinary times. So I'll leave it at that. I'm also wondering if there was anything in the budget in any non-education areas that may have helped us. I think I heard something about gas tax relief, other areas. Was there anything that we saw in other parts of the budget that might help a school board like ours with our operating costs? Thank you.
So through the chair, in the school operations portion of the grants, which is facilities, basically our facilities management department, there was a 2% increase in the non-salary benchmarks. And that is intended to offset things like utilities and insurance and other costs. That being said, and that was about $5.7 million for TDSB. We have received this, and school boards have received this 2% over a number of years. So as staff was preparing our initial projection, that 5.7 million was included in the initial projection. So there was no impact, unfortunately, when the grants were released.
Okay, thank you very much. It is so impressive. That was so accurate, but also so sad, as I was hopeful that that the need would be reflected as I understand, and this is something to confirm, that staff continue to meet with the ministry to discuss our financial position, even throughout this investigative period, that there continue to be meetings between TDSB staff and ministry staff on our board's finances. Is that correct?
Through the chair, we haven't had a meeting during the investigation period, but we are regularly setting up meetings with the ministry, yes.
Okay, thank you. And this, I'm also kind of going back. It's hard for me to understand how there was a 3.3% increase overall, but it still just translates to 1.9% for TDSB. And even that doesn't really translate to any new money for the things that, for new adults in buildings. And so I think you helped walk me through that. We have fewer students, therefore we're getting a lower share of that 3.3%. And much of that is going to salary increases for existing adults in existing buildings. And so it's not increasing, while it is increasing the budget number, it's not in fact increasing support for students. Do I have that understanding correct? Thank you.
Through the chair, yeah, that is correct. And I would say that the other sort of component that TDSB didn't receive is, I think it was 2 years ago, the ministry changed the transportation funding, the way that transportation was funded. At that time, TDSB received a fairly significant increase in funding in that realignment of grants. So in the case where we're, and I'm going to say, put in quotes, a loser on the census redistribution of one funding line. On the redistribution of the transportation funding, we were actually winners 2 years ago. And so those boards that were the quote unquote losers have had some real challenges with their transportation. And so the ministry has been working with those boards in order to assist in bringing it back up to an amount that can support their transportation costs. So a lot of that 6.3% increase went to the boards that were initial losers. And so because we were one of the winners, our portion of that increase in transportation was significantly lower. And sorry, and through the chair, I'll just add, because we had a new transportation contract this year, which increased, I think it was by 16%. For 1 year, we had a little bit of reprieve where our grants actually matched our expenditures. But now there's quite a bit of a divide again. I think it's closer to $7 million, if I'm correct, difference between our funding and our expenditures because of the increase in our contract and not the same increase in our funding.
Thank you so much. I still have questions. And so if I could go back on the list after others have had turn, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And before we start the second round, are there any other trustees who have questions? Hearing and seeing none, I will pass the chair to Trustee Earhart. Thank you, and through you, Chair.
Go ahead.
The investigator's role, that's a kind of a new experience for me in the time frame that I've been here. If I understand correctly, the document was due to the minister on May 30th. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes.
Are we because this is a new experience, and I'm trying to understand what this will mean for us in our budget process, are we expecting, is this a Roman Colosseum thumbs up, thumbs down type of thing? Or are we expecting specific monetary instructions to come out of, like, are we expecting lines to be highlighted for us, or specific direction to come out of that process?
Through the chair, I'll add a little bit to the first response and then move to the second. You're responding to your second question and ask Eddie Zucker to add. So the initial report was due to the ministry by April 30th. And there were follow-up questions that came to staff. After that initial report was submitted, staff provided responses to the investigator in relation to those in relation to that outreach, and then it's then up to the investigator, PwC, which was appointed to investigate, to then submit a final report to the ministry. We are not able to confirm at this time the status of the report with respect to where that is with the ministry. At this time, we can provide further updates once received. In relation to what we might expect, I'll hearken back to what the minister announced at the end of April, and what subsequently was received in communication, written communication from the ministry, that the role of the investigator was to assess the financial condition of the board, including looking at executive compensation, and to report back to the minister on their findings, and as well to make a recommendation to the minister based on their findings, whether the minister should appoint a supervisor to supervise or oversee the board. So at this point, it's not our understanding, based on our experience through the investigation, that we would anticipate the minister or the ministry coming back based on the investigation with a line-by-line report or recommendations as to specific savings and so forth. However, staff do not have access to the report to be able to make that determination. I will ask Eddie Zucker to add further to that.
Yeah, through the chair, I don't really have anything more to add. In conversations with ministry staff, they're awaiting the results or the final report as well. And so hard to make any determinations until we have the report.
If I may, just one other piece that I thought of through the chair. We also can't be certain about the timeline for the minister's response or minister response once the ministry receives and considers the final report. It will be at the minister's discretion how the minister chooses to respond and when the minister chooses to respond. And so we would hope that there might be some communication regarding the results of the investigation leading into into the board's decision about passing of this year's budget, but that can be counted on for certain. And so our strongest advice would be for the board to continue to move towards passing a balanced budget based on the current conditions and what is presently known. And if there should be any additional information provided to trustees prior to that, then that could certainly be considered.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I don't have anything further at this time, so I'll take the chair back. Thank you. And Trustee Earhart, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm just going to go through my notes. I did want to ask, so just on transportation, to repeat, right now, there's a $7 million difference between funding and expenditure. And is that, can we categorize that at all in our transportation in terms of what particular transportation is being underfunded, or is it broader and more general than that? Thank you.
Through you, Chair, I would say it's more general than that. When we look at transportation budget, it takes off obviously our portion of the TSTG administrative costs. It takes on our regular day school transportation. It takes on our special education transportation. It takes on the TTC tokens that we provide to students in secondary as replacement to busing. And then it takes on unique things like we have the relocations when we're doing constructions at the schools like Hodgkin, where we move the students to another site, and that transportation is in there. So the overall transportation budget is more complex than just one item.
Okay, thank you. So broadly speaking, it captures and includes the services we're offering. It's just insufficient for the costs that we incur for those service offerings. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would say yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. And I'm just remarking that one of the things that we were presented with in terms of why is our deficit position where it is this year in particular was some of the increased costs in transportation. So like all public and private sector entities were facing increased costs of doing the same work, is my understanding of it. So thank you. I also wanted to ask about the census and the anticipated impacts for outer years. My understanding it's 5 years. My recollection is that now, and this is where my recollection isn't clear. There will be an impact, a cost impact every single year, but that cost was not being applied equally, correct? I'm wondering how this will impact our financial situation in future years. Thank you.
So thank you. And through the chair, it's a great question. We were unaware of how it would impact the current year until we got the grants and sort of did the calculations and kind of kicked under the tires to see where the impact was being felt, because it's in multiple grants and it's buried as part of those grants. So again, that's part of the work that the budget team did, is to determine how the phase-in has impacted TDSB. So it was 3.2 last year. We're estimating at 5.7 this current year. Our assumptions moving forward is that that's something that we will have to take into account when we build the projected financial position right at the upfront. So we're looking at, just again, this is our best guess, about $5.5 million over each year for the next 3 years. So in total, you're looking at almost a $30 million impact of that census over the complete phase-in of it over those 5 years.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry, as I hadn't sent any of these questions in advance. And so if the information isn't here, I understand. But just remind me the census. So we essentially are obligated to, or we are offering the same service through those grants but to either fewer students or fewer people in the identified categories that would be funded for that service. Is that how that gets translated out? Thank you.
So through the chair, I think a good example, and I think we talked about it at the last meeting when we had our delegate. One of the big areas that the census impacts is in that differentiated support category. And I think it was about 4.4 million that we were seeing a decrease year over year, but we are still providing the same services and servicing the same number of students. So again, it just, by doing that and by having a decrease in funding, what it does is contribute to our deficit.
Okay, that's just nothing sounds good, but thank you. I wanted to ask, I'm going into Appendix A now, into some of the questions, some of the answers to questions that were asked, and there's quite a bit here. And so there's quite a bit for pools. I did want to ask about the morning pool availability through the school year, and if that included change room time, the 7 to 8 a.m., or if change room availability could be in addition to that 8 a.m. time. It's a very specific question. And so if the answer isn't available, I can ask separate for it to be made available. And thank you.
Through the chair, I'm just wondering if there is somebody online that maybe can assist in answering that question. Maybe Indaba or Goma or Jonathan.
To you, Mr. Chair, we would be able to have availability from 7 to 8. I would just have to ask about caretaking time for that hour. Thank you.
Sorry, and through the chair, I'm just checking with the staff, and it looks like it's available in 3 schools right now. Not all schools, and I'm not sure what I think it's just based on availability.
I'm still going through. There was quite a bit of information, so thank you. And that does stem from having been a high school lifeguard who lifeguarded the morning swim before attending my classes. And so I was definitely interested in that one, and know that community members are often interested in early swims. There was quite a bit of information about itinerant music instruction and responses here. One that I wanted to just bring out was around the distribution of IMIs and are they distributed equitably? And just wondering if staff could provide a bit of a response to that. It did seem that across the total schools served, there were 38 having an LOI from 1 to 50 and 38 having an LOI from 401 to 468. So is that being described as being being distributed equally, would we say? How would we categorize how IMIs are being distributed across the system? And thank you.
Thank you. And through the chair, I'll invite System Superintendent Liz Holder to comment on the distribution currently of IMI programs based on LOI status.
Thank you for the question. And through the chair, we would consider IMI distribution to be equal as opposed to equitably distributed, for the simple reason that some of the highest LOI schools have the same number of IMIs as some of the lowest LOI schools, and then the remaining IMIs are more or less evenly distributed across remaining schools by LOI.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I see I'm out of time. Would it be possible to get back on the list, Chair?
Yep, you can get on as many times as you like. Trustee King.
Good evening, everyone, through you, Chair. Thank you, staff, for all the continued work behind the report and our considerations of the budget. I have to start just a few questions related to Appendix C, the responsive education funding. Just a couple of questions about how the changes relate to our delivery of programs and services. Through you, Chair, to staff, I'm wondering first about the de-streaming and implementation support. I recall last year that when we went through this process with the new structure of the core education funding, we kind of found out, I think a little bit later in the game that we would have liked, that 11 million in funding was no longer there. And if I'm reading this correctly, there is now zero funding being provided to support de-streaming. Am I reading that correctly?
Through the chair, that's correct. We would have received almost 200,000 last year for implementation supports, and it's zero for 25-26.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, do we continue to have the same need to continue that work? Is the need still there, and are we funding it internally then, or is this now a need that's not being met? How are we impacted?
Thank you, and through the chair. Although we don't have specific data that would outline what you've outlined, however, we believe that the need is still there. Certainly when that $11 million was effectively taken off the table, some of the supports that we were providing for that transition from grade 8 to grade 9 and in grade 9 and grade 10 was certainly being utilized. And so that certainly would have had an impact. Thank you.
Thank you. So as a follow-up through the chair, I recall last year we continued to find that money within the budget so that we were still delivering on what the same 11 million would have delivered on. Are we continuing to find that money in the budget for 25-26?
Through the chair, yes, that 11 million supported staffing. And that staffing has continued in the current year and is included in the 25-26 budget as well.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to move on to the graduation coaches for Black students. I see that there is a slight increase over last year, and I'm just wondering what that translates into, if staff know that yet. Is that, for instance, additional staff or anything else?
So through the chair, most of the increases that you see in the sub-appendix C related to the REPs are specifically to offset the increases in salaries for the staff that are included in there. So I would say most of these would be under the teaching or the teaching component. And so there's a 2.75% increase for teachers included in the collective agreement. So those costs are the increases in funding are just to offset those specific costs. So it's the same support, just a different cost because of the increase in salaries.
Okay, thank you. Through the chair, would that apply to the reading education staff as well?
Yes, through the chair,
Okay.
the reading education staff, as well as the math, school math facilitators. So those are the larger increases, and those again are as a result of staffing and the increase in staffing costs from the collective agreement.
Okay, thank you. So one last question, moving on from that page. We also spoke about reductions from central departments. And I believe staff spoke about a target being provided to each department to find suggestions for reductions. And my understanding is they could look different. They're largely operational. They could even be, somewhat inconsequential if they're kind of small lines, small amounts off multiple lines. But I'm just wondering if it's the intention of staff to flag for trustees if there are any proposed reductions as a result of that decision, that might potentially just halt any work in areas that we're interested in knowing about, anything that would just impact commitments that we've made or that are the expectation of the system. Or that
Thank
might,
you.
or sorry, or that might be raised as community concerns.
Thank you, and through the chair. My initial reaction is there will be some projects that are impacted, and those, if they are impacting a specific department, then they would have been updated. Like, for example, in IT, if it's a project that was intended for next year and is no longer happening, then the department would have been updated and could impact sort of the future progress. But otherwise, there shouldn't be significant impacts to that will be noticeable in the community. And if there are, we can include that in the report on June 16th.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And I can imagine that my colleagues might appreciate as well, just having that heads up before communities or families learn of any changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee King. Are there any other trustees before we go to round 3 of the Eric Hart McLean Show? Hearing and seeing none. Trustee Earhart.
Thanks very much. I'll try to keep this brief. So I wanted to ask around in the QAs around itinerant music instructors, there was some discussion around next steps, how we ensure all schools have a good music program, and talking about a renewed model to use instrument inventory along with LOI data to guide equitable distribution of musical resources and provide targeted professional learning. I'm wondering how much of this could happen with the IMI model still in place, and what's being contemplated next year. Should trustees support continuation of IMI? Thank you.
In terms of the renewed model, one of the things that was suggested was to look at the music inventory for schools across the system. That inventory is maintained by the music department. And there was also a suggestion that there will be a $1 million holdback that will be used to look to see where instruments are already located, and also to take LOI of schools into account when deciding which schools should be provided with instruments. In terms of what will happen if we move to the renewed music programming model, schools that will be allocated instruments will be prioritized for professional learning so that the staff at those schools will be developing skills in using those instruments with students. I believe there was a second part to your question. Could you remind me of what it was?
Yes, and thank you so much through the chair. I was wondering how much of this could be done if we maintain the itinerant music instructor program, if some of these changes would be contemplated even with the IMI programming in place. Thank you.
Perhaps I'll begin and then invite Assistant Superintendent Holder to contribute through the chair. Thank you for the creative thinking and the question. Part of the concept behind the renewed music program and the equitable approach for providing the professional learning and the highest LOI schools to receive the professional learning was that we would be having savings in the $1 million. If we were to maintain the investment as it currently is, Trustee Earhart, Our first challenge would be in supporting schools that don't currently have an IMI program, may not have instruments, and we don't have funding to be supporting those identified schools to have access to instrument purchase. Secondly, we would have to really be changing the model in what IMIs do. And it would be different. It couldn't be the same. And supporting schools without IMI programming that are demonstrated high need in the LOI without an additional investment. And as our task before us was to be presenting you options for getting to balance, that was not in our mandate to be looking at an invested, renewed music program. Superintendent Holder, is there anything I'm not thinking about?
To add to what Associate Director Cisco's just contributed, I would also add that historically, IMIs were placed where music instruments are located. So if the status quo is maintained, it would be very difficult, as was mentioned previously, for the assignment of IMIs to change. What we proposed was to use the cost savings to provide schools that have been historically underserved the opportunity to acquire musical instruments and then provide them with professional learning supports. If the status quo is maintained, we wouldn't be able to do that. There is much less flexibility.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about Chromebooks. I know that this had said that some of the information couldn't be provided in time for this report. Are we anticipating getting further information in line with the board motion before the options to balance? Do we think that's possible? And thank you.
So through the chair, is there specific information that the trustee is looking for?
I think I'll need to go back to the motion. There's the Q&As here, but I think trustees have been looking for information about the benefits
Oh, sorry.
of the Chromebook,
Yeah.
about the program. Yeah.
So through the chair, as you can imagine, that's a fairly extensive review. So we would be looking likely at the fall to bring that back through the chair.
The work has been initiated, I can reassure you, but it's a complex series of questions. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. If it's happening in the fall, of course, it would be helpful to have it for trustees' decision-making, of course, but I'd add that I'd also be interested in getting some understanding, I'll share this as feedback, around screen time usage, knowing that Toronto Public Health has come to the board during our 22 to 26 mandate expressing concerns with screen time for children since the pandemic. And so it would be helpful to also get a sense, understanding that different screen time has different values. I get questions all the time from families around having a better understanding of how much screens are used or how our system is even navigating that across classrooms and what that means for the aggregate total of screen time that children are using every day. So just putting that there as feedback. So there were several responses here around the one-to-one device program. I note that will the devices last for 6 years? Staff believe that TDSB will be able to provide a device that will last 6 years. I'm just wondering if that means that there's any consideration of a device other than a Chromebook. Thank you.
Through the chair, I'm wondering if Executive Officer Singh can speak to this, please. So he may not be there, but I think what we're saying is that it is something that we'll be looking at as well, especially when we look, if the motion is to move from grade 5 entry point, or sorry, if the recommendation is to move from a grade 5 entry point to a grade 7 entry point, and that device has to last 6 years, that's one of the considerations, is how long a device could last. Obviously, there are the considerations as well, is that the best device for students in their education? So that's something that we can take back. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just further note, I also received by way of feedback in the community comments around returning devices to schools at the end of a school day. So rather than children bringing the device home every day, or students bringing the device home every day, that devices be left at schools, or there be more fleshed out thinking on that. In terms of the cost implications, I would imagine, however, there would also be other implications to consider on that, particularly if some of the aims of the program are poverty alleviation for a broader family accessing devices. So I'll leave that input there. I'm just going to go through my notes. I think I had, I believe it was mentioned that staff were considering the feedback from permit holders, as discussed at the Community Use of Schools Community Advisory Committee, to extend the ability for pool permits into beyond January 2026. So to see permits for the entire 25-26 year. Did I hear correctly? That's being considered by way of feedback? Thank you.
Through the chair, that's correct. That is something that we've heard from the committee via emails from some community members, as well as from trustees. So recognizing that it would have been a 2-year implementation of the entire to get to a break-even point anyway. So this would just delay the entire implementation. So the savings in 25-26 won't be necessarily recognized until 26-27 in some instances. So that we are looking at what the differences would be.
Okay, thank you. I see I don't have much time left. I have 2 questions. One, I wanted to ask around use of proceeds of disposition, and if staff foresaw there were any areas of the budget where trustees could be justified in making a request for one-time use of proceeds of disposition, knowing that in previous years we had made such a request to keep social workers, child and youth workers, caring and safe school staff, and school-based safety monitors. Thank you.
Through the chair, so I would say that proceeds of disposition should be considered only for one-time challenges for the board, because we cannot rely on proceeds of disposition as a consistent way in order for us to fund our operating budget. That being said, if there are one area, there is the second part. The original budget deficit recovery plan did contemplate using $11 million of proceeds in 25-26, and that related to the phase-in of the amortization of the employee future benefit liability. That number is actually 13.7 million for 26-27. And so I would say if there is any area that is truly a one-time expenditure, that is it. So in 25-26, there will be $13.7 million of expenditures, which will not exist in 26-27. There's a 100% guarantee that we will finalize the implementation of the phase-in of that liability.
Okay, I still have another question, but I want to use my 7 seconds on this, so I may have to go back on the list. I apologize. So our staff contemplating proposing the use of proceeds of disposition for that 13.7 million of amortization for the 25-26 school year, or would you require trustees to move a motion for that to be presented to us? Thank you.
Through the chair, when staff brings back sort of a 2-year plan, it will include the expectation that we get below the $16.7 million that is going to be expected to be in the deficit or in the accumulated surplus. So if we were below that, we would still be in line with the expectations of the ministry with regards to balancing the budget. That being said, it would deplete all of our reserves. So we would be down to basically zero. We can include that as an option that trustees may have to either use our accumulated surplus or to potentially ask for the use of POD for 1 more year.
Okay, thank you. I would be interested in seeing that option. And just my last question, if there's nobody else on the list.
Well, it's just me and you, but okay, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Chair. It's question 50. It noted how many more teachers does TDSB have than the regulations provide for? It says TDSB has 110 more kindergarten teachers than the regulation requires, and TDSB has 68 more grades 4 to 8 teachers than the regulation requires. I wanted to clarify that to date, by way of board motion, trustees approved, though frankly I was concerned with, the grade 4 to 8 class sizes. But to date, there has been no option put forward around the 110 kindergarten teachers, correct? Those are being maintained in the system to support early years?
So through the chair, I would say that the motion that was approved was more vague. It was a reduction of or a savings of 7.5 million in getting to class size. And so I would say it would be both instances. So kindergarten and 4 to 8 would be on the table there.
Okay, that's not what I wanted. Well, every teacher matters. Every teacher matters. Every classroom matters, of course. But I am very concerned about early years and conditions of early years classrooms and what I'm hearing in a different way than I'm hearing about grade 4 to 8 classrooms, which is about learning and ability to learn. But what I'm hearing in early years classrooms is around safety. That's my experience personally as a trustee. That may not be consistent with what our system is witnessing overall. And just thank you very much for taking the time to answer all of my questions. I wish we were in a better situation. And thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Gerhart, and I'm going to pass you the chair if I can.
Of course.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. When Richard Christie came and presented the Environmental Sustainability Office's report, there was, he had, I think, 2 members of the team that were going and implementing a pilot project that produced, if memory serves, in the neighborhood of $1.3 million in savings in Learning Center 1, that through centrally coordinating when everything would start in the mornings and when the air, and controlling the heat and hydro and whatnot. And I know there's at least my understanding that work is going to continue. Have we forecasted that savings in our budget for the next year?
Through the chair, I believe we estimate utilities based on usage, so I would say yes. But I can confirm that.
Okay. Because it wouldn't be just, through you, Chair, it wouldn't be just what was saved this year. Theoretically, if they continue and expand to do it more schools, those savings should increase. So there should be additional savings assuming all things being equal and that the methods that they're trying are equally as effective in the additional buildings that they're trying them in.
And through you, Chair, I would say yes, but the unfortunate thing is between utility rate increases and variability in weather is sometimes difficult to gauge other than looking at, it's hard to, but we do try to forecast for utilities using previous history and then working with our facilities team.
Right. I guess my point is, though, through you, Chair, is that him and his team are trying to reinvent the wheel and provide our needs in a more cost-effective manner, which I appreciate and are environmentally beneficial as well. Logic suggests if you do it on a broader base, that there would be additional savings created. So I'm interested in whether we're trying to capture that in our forecast, because we're facing some pretty difficult decisions. And if there's savings out there to be had that would help us with next year's budget, that we have proof of concept already, that we know what to do, we know how to get them, and it's our plan that those are actually going to take place. I'm not suggesting we're going to get a Florida winter or anything. I'm suggesting that they're going to, continue to do this good work. And I think the expectation of the savings would be reasonable, and I'm curious as to whether we've incorporated it.
Through the chair, Executive Officer Pachetti is away, so I can't go to her. But my assumption is that it's included, but we will confirm that. And if it hasn't, we will certainly update.
Okay, thank you. And through you, Chair, the Auditor General's report that was issued in December of 2024, it talked about, there were kind of two financial recommendations. It suggested that the TDSB and the province, that there was an issue around mental health supports. When the core funding came in, were there increases in the mental health supports that were identified as a need by the Auditor General?
Through the chair, other than increases in salary benchmarks to maintain the current staffing, no.
Okay, thank you. And through you, Chair, the other recommendation, as I understand it, suggested that the TDSB and the province explore whether the TDSB has a structural deficit challenge. Can you tell us about what work's being done collaboratively to make that determination, and what effect that potentially would have on our budget process?
Thank you, and through the chair. So the work that's being done is staff is meeting with ministry staff in order to have those discussions. You would think it would be easy to agree on whether or not we have a structural deficit. And I would say that we're working towards that agreement. Meaning we are defining structural deficit as our expenses are more than our funding on a consistent basis. And when the ministry looks at it, they're looking at it to say, if you were only doing what is required of you for K-12 education, you wouldn't actually have a deficit. So therefore it's not structural, it's decision-based. And so that's the conversation that we are having about, and that, I think that was very clear even in the ministry response in the Auditor General report, is that they didn't necessarily agree. And that's why the recommendation was to determine whether or not we had one, because the Auditor General wasn't saying you have one based on the way that you spend or the way that you're funded. And they weren't saying they agreed with the ministry in that decisions that we make create the deficit, it's not structural based on the grants that we receive. And so we are still working towards coming to that agreement. That being said, the impact on the budget is that the options to balance that trustees see in front of them really are those K-12, because we didn't just hear it from the ministry when we discussed structural deficit. It does talk about it in the Auditor General report. It also, in the 2 letters that we received from the ministry, talked about concentrating on K-12 and that anything outside of it should be break even. So that's where we really are with regards to the options to balance. That's the impact that it's having on our budget. I don't see the discussions leading to additional funding from ministry, unless the second part of it, of the Auditor General recommendation, was to look at cases where TDSB has unique circumstances. And so we haven't really had those discussions yet. And it is possible that once we can both agree that yes, the deficit is created by the unique circumstances of TDSB, that we could start to have a conversation about, okay, so if it's unique to TDSB, how is it going to be funded for TDSB? Because we know that, for example, rural boards have unique circumstances that's been identified by and agreed to by the ministry, and they provide additional funding for rural boards. We know that French boards have had identified unique circumstances, and there's additional funding for French boards. So I believe that if we are able to agree that there are unique circumstances that impact either TDSB specifically or maybe large urban boards specifically, that we could start to have a conversation about funding. That is not a 25-26 impact, unfortunately, but I think it's an important conversation to have.
Okay, thank you. And through you, Chair, it's been a long budget cycle when I found an element of the ministry's position that I agree with. So I agree that part of the challenges with our budget are operational decisions that trustees make that the ministry has issues with, because we are trying to fund priorities that for 80 years, the TDSB has been able to provide to students. But my understanding of a structural deficit are built-in things that challenge the system, create expenses that we have no mechanism to deal with. And what comes to mind is the CPP and EI shortcomings and the salary gap. When we turn the page from one year to the next, we are immediately $71.3 million in a hole. I believe that's a structural deficit and not an operation. That's not a byproduct of what's a decision made around the table about whether we are willing to accept options that staff are required to present us. We are in a hole to the tune of $71.3 million every year and have no cards to play whatsoever to deal with it. And I think that's the structural deficit, or the foundation of that conversation that needs to be had with ministry staff and the Auditor General staff, if mediators are required, to try to figure out, what is decisions the trustees are responsible for that would differ from a real foundational structural deficit that we don't have anything to do with. So I'll leave that with you, with your ongoing conversations and the collaboration with the province. And I have nothing further, so I'll take the chair back. Do we have any? This is kind of last call for questions for trustees. Hearing and seeing none, I need this is a report for receipt. For receipt, I need a mover and seconder for receipt. Trustee Trustee Patel will move. Trustee Earhart will second. Can you open the vote, please?
Trustee Earhart in favor,
McLean in
receipt.
favor.
not of accepting the circumstances we face.
Sorry? You just protesting? Is that what that was? Okay. McLean in favor?
Trustee Rajwani in favor.
Thank you, Trustee Rajwani. Trustee Patel, Trustee Wong, and Trustee Lee, can you share how you vote, please?
I'm in favor of receipt.
Lee in favor.
I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think all three are, I think I heard all three were in favor. Trustee DeVitis, as you joined us? We'll mark him absent and close the vote, please. And that carries. So I would again like to thank staff and trustees and members of the public who have been, very patient with this process. And this is the second time we've had to, well, we did it twice with the other meeting, but we only had to break this one once. And appreciate everyone's flexibility and the ongoing work to get us to the end. And ultimately, at our next meeting, we are finally at the point where we will, on the meeting of the 16th, where decisions will be required of the board. And with that, I'll take a motion for adjournment, please. Trustee Earhart, someone will second.
Trustee Rajwani.
Mr. Arnie will second. All in favor? Any opposed? That carries. We are adjourned. Have a good night.